Welcome back, dear friends. If you are watching this, it means something special. You are not just going through life. You want to learn, understand, and discover the deeper truths of the world. Today, on the Legends in English, we share one of the most inspirational English stories ever. The story of a man whose influence has lasted over 2,500 years. Yet he had no wealth, no army, and did not write a single book. This story will help you improve your English, motivate you, and teach important life lessons about courage, honesty, and thinking deeply. This is the story of Socrates, the man who walked barefoot, slept on stone floors, and lived simply while changing the way people thought in Athens forever. Born in 470 BC in Athens, a city famous for its wealth, art, and pride, Socrates came into a world full of marble temples, statues of gods, poets, warriors, and philosophers. But under all this beauty, something important was missing. The people of Athens were too focused on fame, pleasure, and money. They had forgotten to take care of their souls. In the middle of this rich city, a poor boy was born. A boy whose curious mind and endless questions would later challenge the whole world. Socrates came from a simple family. His father, Socrates, was a stonemason who built walls and pillars, and his mother, Phanerette, was a midwife who helped women give birth. Even as a child, Socrates was different. He was not impressed by statues, kings, or riches. He did not care about how people looked or what they owned. His main concern was simple but very deep. What is right? What is good? What is real? He could sit alone for hours, thinking, while other children chased coins, games, and fun. In a city where people cared a lot about appearances, Socrates lived simply. He wore the same clothes every day, often walked barefoot, and ate only what he needed. He once said, "He who is not content with what he has will never be content with more." People laughed at him, called him ugly, ordinary, even foolish. But Socrates did not care about their words. He cared about truth, goodness, and understanding. Unlike others who wanted praise and admiration, Socrates asked questions. He would go to the rich and powerful and ask, "Do you think you are wise? What is wisdom?" Quote, the rich and proud often became confused by his simple, sharp questions. Socrates did not ask to embarrass anyone. He wanted people to see their own ignorance and to think deeply about life, justice, and goodness. He called himself a gadfly sent by the gods to wake up this city. He challenged not only people but the entire system of Athens, its values, beliefs, and ideas about justice. Socrates did not write books. He believed truth cannot be kept on paper. It must be discovered through conversation and thinking. His classroom was the streets, markets, temples, and gyms. He spoke to shoemakers, farmers, politicians, and teenagers. He became a teacher of life, helping young people to look for wisdom instead of wealth. Among his students were future famous philosophers like Plato and Xenophon, who watched not only what he taught but also how he lived, with patience, courage, and simplicity. But not everyone liked Socrates. The rich and powerful in Athens saw him as a threat. He was not violent, and he did not start any rebellion. Yet his questions exposed lies, showed weaknesses, and made people think. Athens, which had been proud and strong, had suffered. After the Peloponnesian War, fear and worry were everywhere. In such times, societies often look for someone to blame. Socrates, the thinker who asked questions about everything, became that target. He was accused of two things: corrupting young people and disrespecting the gods. In reality, the young admired him because he taught them to think for themselves, and he never insulted the gods. Socrates questioned blind faith and taught people to follow their inner moral voice. His way of asking many questions, now called the Socratic method, became a famous method for learning, used today in schools, law, psychology, and debates worldwide. Socrates' teaching was new and different. He did not give simple answers. Instead, he helped people examine their beliefs, think carefully, and challenge what they assumed to be true. For example, if someone said, "Justice means helping friends and hurting enemies," he would ask, "Who are your enemies? Does hurting them make things fair?" In this way, he showed that real wisdom starts with asking questions, not claiming to know everything, even with all the mocking and growing anger from the powerful. Socrates stayed focused on his purpose. He did not want fame, money, or praise. He lived what he taught: a life of simplicity, honesty, and thinking deeply. As his influence grew, the powerful grew more afraid. They feared minds they could not control. By the time Socrates was in his 70s, Athens was no longer the bright city it had been. Once full of art, democracy, and philosophy, it was now hurt by the long Peloponnesian War. Fear and instability were everywhere. In such times, societies often look for someone to blame. That someone was Socrates. Socrates did not hold political office. He did not write manifestos or lead armies. Yet his calm presence and constant questioning made the powerful uncomfortable. By challenging their authority, he showed their fear and weakness. In 399 BC, the city charged him with two crimes: corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. The charges were not just legal, they were political. Many young people had followed Socrates, learning to think for themselves and question leaders. This scared those in power, who feared a generation challenging their rule. Socrates did not teach rebellion. He taught inquiry. He encouraged reflection, honesty, and living rightly. This made him dangerous in a society unwilling to face hard truths. The trial was public. 501 citizens were chosen as jurors. No lawyers, no judges. Socrates defended himself calmly, wearing his usual simple clothes, barefoot, and unarmed except with his words. The city expected him to beg or submit, but Socrates stood fearless. "I am not here to beg for my life," he told the court. "I am here to speak the truth." He explained that he had never corrupted the youth. His teachings were not meant to destroy faith in the gods, but to guide people toward understanding what is right and good. He reminded the city that asking questions and living thoughtfully were not acts of rebellion, but acts of service. The famous line he spoke shook Athens: "The unexamined life is not worth living." This was more than philosophy. It was a call to wake up the mind and soul, to live consciously, not just follow life blindly. The jurors found him guilty, though the margin was narrow. Then came sentencing. In Athens, the condemned could suggest their own punishment. Socrates, ever calm and confident, suggested he be rewarded with free meals for life, like an Olympic champion, because he had devoted his life to the good of Athens. Naturally, the jurors rejected this. He was finally sentenced to die by drinking poison hemlock. For the next 30 days, Socrates stayed in prison. Calm and peaceful, he received visits from students, friends, and even guards. Plato, his devoted student, wrote down these final conversations, capturing a man whose mind remained free even behind stone walls. Crito, a close friend, begged him to escape. They had a plan, resources, and safe places ready. Socrates refused. He explained calmly that escaping would go against everything he had taught about honesty, justice, and obeying the law. What is more important, living or living rightly? He asked. His refusal was not stubbornness, but a strong commitment to the principles he had followed all his life. To run away would show that his teachings were empty words. On his last day, Socrates continued to teach. He talked about the soul, virtue, and the meaning of life with his visitors. He said death should not be feared. It is either a peaceful sleep or a journey to another world. For a philosopher, it is a release, not the end. He even joked about meeting Homer in the afterlife to question Achilles. His calmness inspired everyone, showing courage not through fighting, but through thought and understanding. When the poison hemlock started to work, Socrates walked steadily, lay down, and remained composed. His last request was both practical and symbolic. He reminded Crito to repay a debt to Asclepius, the god of healing, showing that death had freed him from the limits of the body. With his eyes closed and his breathing slowing, the greatest thinker of Athens passed away peacefully. Even in death, Socrates' influence was huge. Some people who had voted for his execution felt guilty. Citizens whispered about the injustice, realizing that the man they feared had harmed no one but inspired everyone. Plato, seeing this, made a silent promise to preserve the life, teachings, and spirit of Socrates. From Plato's promise came his famous dialogues, lively conversations, and philosophical stories that brought Socrates back to life on paper. In these works, Socrates is always the main character, teaching, questioning, and inspiring. In Apology, we read Socrates' defense at his trial. He explains why the unexamined life is not worth living and stands unafraid in front of fear and injustice. In Crito, Socrates explains why it is never right to do wrong, even if doing wrong might save your life. In Phaedo, he talks about the soul, life after death, and the meaning of virtue. These works show not just what Socrates taught, but how he lived. Through Plato came Aristotle, who used Socratic questioning in logic, science, and ethics. Aristotle taught Alexander the Great, who spread Greek ideas across the world. In this way, Socrates' influence traveled from a small city in Greece to many continents. His method of asking questions became the foundation of Western philosophy, law, science, and education. Even Roman thinkers admired Socrates. Cicero, Seneca, and others learned from his courage, ethics, and search for truth. Early Christian thinkers were influenced too. Street Augustine studied Plato's dialogues and found Socratic wisdom in them. Socrates' courage and honesty became a model for moral integrity and intellectual honesty. During the Middle Ages, Socratic ideas were preserved in monasteries, churches, and early universities. Scholars translated Greek texts into Latin and Arabic, sharing his teachings across cultures. Muslim philosophers like Avicenna and Averroes studied Socratic thought, applying it in their own societies. Socrates became more than a man. He became a symbol of questioning, integrity, and courage. Even after many centuries, Socrates' teachings spread far and wide. His students, their students, and the generations that followed carried his method, showing that asking questions, seeking truth, and living morally is a universal message for humanity. Socrates' life reminds us that even one person, living simply and honestly, can change the world forever. The Renaissance brought Europe back to learning and discovery. Artists, scientists, and thinkers found Plato's writings again, and with them, Socrates' way of asking questions and thinking deeply. Leonardo da Vinci looked for perfection in nature, but Socrates had already searched for perfection in the human soul. Michelangelo's art showed the search for truth. Just like Socrates taught that we could reach virtue through thinking and acting rightly, Galileo and Newton used observation and questions, ideas that came from Socratic thinking, to change science forever. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Socrates' ideas inspired revolutions. Thinkers and leaders in France, America, and other countries admired his courage to question leaders, his loyalty to justice, and his refusal to follow lies. In France, revolutionaries learned moral courage from him. In America, leaders like Thomas Jefferson respected reason, freedom, and inquiry, all inspired by Socratic thought. Even in India, reformers and thinkers saw his message of truth and moral integrity as universal. Socrates' ideas did not stay only in the West. Across Asia and Africa, scholars studied his philosophy and combined it with local traditions like Confucianism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. His message was clear for everyone. Be honest with yourself. Think carefully. Question what you hear. And live with purpose. The Socratic method is still used today in classrooms, law schools, and universities worldwide. When a teacher asks, "What do you think? Why do you believe that? Can you explain it?" Quote, they are following Socrates' way of teaching. Even outside schools, Socrates' lessons continue. Journalists, activists, whistleblowers, and teachers who speak truth to power often face trouble, just like Socrates did. But their work continues, showing that ideas survive even fear and oppression. Socrates never wanted fame or followers. He wanted people to live honestly, think deeply, and act rightly. Anyone who asks hard questions, refuses to lie, or follows conscience over the crowd carries part of Socrates inside them. Socrates' influence continues because his life was not about money, power, or control. He never left Athens far. He never ruled or led armies. But the values he lived, courage, honesty, virtue, and constant questioning, spread far and shaped the world. From one barefoot, poor man came a chain of thinkers who changed civilizations. Plato, Aristotle, Alexander the Great, Roman philosophers, early Christian thinkers, Renaissance artists, and modern leaders all followed Socrates' wisdom. Even today, the world needs Socrates' spirit. In every country, people ask hard questions, challenge corrupt leaders, and make others think. Their voices may be silenced, but their influence continues. Socrates' story shows that ideas, truth, and moral courage are stronger than armies, money, or titles. He died in body, but his questions, method, and commitment to virtue make him immortal. Socrates was not a god, prophet, or soldier. He was human, like all of us, yet one simple man, in sandals, with no money and no army, changed human thinking forever. His life asks us, what truth is inside you? What fear will you face? What lies will you challenge? What courage will you show? Even today, Socrates speaks to us, not in his voice, but through the lives he touched, the lessons he gave, and the questions he asked. His life teaches that real power is not in wealth, armies, or fame. Real power is in truth, courage, and learning. Anyone who dares to think, question, and act honestly carries a spark of Socrates' spirit. Socrates' message is still very important today in a world that focuses on looks, quick pleasure, and following the crowd. He shows that a life without thinking is empty. In times of social media, mass influence, and too much information, his call to reflect, question, and live consciously matters more than ever. To live truly, he taught, we must face discomfort, question what we assume, and act with truth and virtue. The Socratic method, which starts by asking questions and never accepting easy answers, still affects how we learn today in schools, law, science, and ethics. Every time a lawyer questions someone in court, every university discussion, and every scientific test, we see his ideas in action. Doctors, researchers, teachers, and thinkers follow his example by asking questions, looking for proof, and trying to understand clearly. Socrates teaches us that true understanding comes from thinking carefully, not just accepting what someone in power says. Socrates also taught that the soul is more important than money or things. In a world that often cares only about wealth, fame, and appearances, he showed another way. Focus on growing morally, improving your inner self, and being brave enough to do the right thing, even if others do not. He showed that living simply, being humble, and staying honest are not weaknesses. They are the most important parts of a meaningful life. His bravery when facing death gives us a lesson that never grows old. Socrates calmly drank poison hemlock to show that truth and principles are more important than comfort or fear. By living and dying according to his beliefs, he made his last act a timeless example of human dignity. Today, leaders, activists, and thinkers still look up to him, showing that living honestly can affect the world far beyond one lifetime. Socrates' influence goes beyond countries, cultures, and time. Even though he lived in Athens, his ideas reached people all over Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Early Christian thinkers, Renaissance scholars, Enlightenment philosophers, and modern teachers all learned from him. His lessons show us that wisdom is for everyone, and seeking truth is something all humans can do. no matter where or when they live. Even in daily life, Socrates' teachings matter. Having courage to ask questions, facing hard truths, and acting honestly in small daily choices can shape families, communities, and society. People who stay honest, fair, and thoughtful can be modern-day Socrates in their own circles. They may not change the whole world, but they can change the minds, hearts, and actions of people around them. Let's remember his 3 greatest gifts to humanity. 1. The power of questions. Socrates showed that wisdom starts when we know we do not know everything. Thinking deeply, challenging assumptions, and asking meaningful questions help us fully engage with life. 2. The importance of virtue over wealth. He proved that honesty, courage, and moral goodness are more important than fame, luxury, or money. A good life leaves a legacy that lasts long. 3. The primacy of the soul and conscience. Socrates taught that caring for your inner life, your soul, ethics, and moral understanding is the true measure of a life well lived. For anyone looking for inspiration, Socrates is a guide. He encourages us to act even when it is dangerous, speak even when silence is easier, and think even when others refuse. His life shows that one ordinary person, committed to truth and honesty, can influence generations, shape civilizations, and leave the world better than they found it. As we think about Socrates' story, ask yourself, if a simple, barefoot man with no money, no army, and no power could change human thought forever, what can you do? What questions should you ask? What fears should you face? What truths should you speak? Socrates shows us that greatness is measured not by wealth or status, but by courage, honesty, and clear thinking. In the end, Socrates was not a god or a prophet. He was human, like you and me. His life, death, and teachings show us that truth matters more than popularity. Virtue is more important than comfort. Courage is the foundation of a meaningful life. Questions are more powerful than answers. Next time you feel fear, doubt, or pressure to follow the crowd, remember Socrates. Remember the man who walked barefoot in Athens, who drank poison without fear, and whose ideas still guide the world. He shows that every person can think deeply, act rightly, and make a lasting difference. Socrates died 2,500 years ago, but his voice is alive in every thoughtful question, every honest choice, and every act of integrity. His story is not just history. It is a living lesson for all of us. The unexamined life is not worth living. And by asking, reflecting, and acting, we honor Socrates every day. Socrates may have lived long ago, but his ideas are still alive today. On the Legends in English, we share his story as one of the most inspirational English stories ever. He teaches us that real power comes not from money, armies, or fame, but from truth, honesty, and courage. His life shows that asking questions, thinking deeply, and living with integrity are more important than anything else. Every time we face fear, make a tough choice, or speak the truth, we carry a piece of Socrates within us. Let this story on the Legends in English inspire you to live wisely, act rightly, and never stop learning, because your thoughts and actions can change the world, just like his did.